Well, thanks for tuning in. And thank you so much, Tony Katsur, CEO of IAB Tech Lab, for spending a little bit of time this morning to go through some of the amazing projects that are coming out from the US. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Sonia, for having me.
Let's start with the most, pressing or, existential issue that we're facing, which is the one on sustainability. I saw that the Tech Lab has released a pretty nifty guidebook this week, and thought I would get some, an update on what you're working on there and what the thinking is. I understand that this is one of a few installments. So I'd love to hear your perspective on what the industry is doing about sustainability from the Tech Lab perspective.
Sure. So our sustainability efforts, we're taking an iterative approach, or a gradually kind of building approach on where did it make sense for us to start from a Tech Lab perspective on sustainability initiatives in the industry, and then how do we expand upon that? And we're close partners with Net Zero here in the US and globally out of the UK. We're working very closely with GARM as well, and it made a lot of sense for us to really focus on, call it the ad execution component of our ecosystem. So we released a sustainability best practices guide the week of Tech Lab Summit. So it was on June 7th that we released this, and it was focused on really low-hanging fruit opportunities for the market to use in order to lower their carbon footprint. So, simple concepts like lazy load of your impression, like that is literally check the box in your ad server to enable things like lazy load. So don't call for the impression, also your CMS, but don't call for the impression if that part of the page hasn't rendered in the browser, right? That stops wasteful impressions. No one sees them to begin with. And every time an impression is used, you're burning carbon. That's just one example. Smart cookie syncing. Be smart about how much you cookie sync. Cookie syncs eat a lot of CPU and bandwidth. And every time CPU, bandwidth, networking, disk is touched, like you use energy. Energy results in burning of carbon. So that's the kind of things we were focused on as this best practices guide, really around ad execution. So whether that be programmatic ad delivery or even direct sold advertising. GARM also released something that same week, which took a wider perspective of best practice, everything from like how you construct creative. So other components of how an ad becomes, how an ad actually makes it from conception to in front of a consumer. GARM took that wider lens. We kind of like fit into the overall kind of GARM framework around sustainability best practices. So that was released on June 7th. What we're now focused on is, and again, in partnership with GARM and then Net Zero, are establishing core metrics around the ad execution component. Again, how an ad is delivered. We are not, to be clear, Tech Lab is not building a carbon calculator for the industry. That's not what we are doing. I've had several inbounds if we are. We're certainly happy to do so if given the requirements by the ecosystem, whether that is IAB Canada, whether that is GARM, whether that's Net Zero. Having the industry establish what should go into a calculator and kind of creating the product requirements around that. Tech Lab's happy to ingest that and build a calculator, host a calculator for the industry, but we're not doing that on our own. That needs to be done in partnership with other trades around the globe. So what we're focused on now are establishing core metrics around, how much carbon goes into the delivery of an impression. Because I've said many times, you can't manage what you can't measure. So let's just start with basic measurements in terms of ad delivery. So that's what we're focused on in the second half of the year. Again, in close partnership with Garmin and Net Zero in particular, to create these core sustainability measures.
Amazing. So in the initial review of the best practices, the low-hanging fruit that you referred to, I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the recommendations there actually represent a real win-win from the perspective of the user experience as well. When you're talking about lazy loads, you're talking about things like ads.txt and inventory management tools, things like that. I mean, it really goes to show how streamlining the ecosystem, cutting out the noise, and then also, eliminating some of the hops can really make a difference in the way that an ad is experienced, but also in the way that the supply chain secures itself. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
Absolutely. I would even say synergies between the anti-fraud and supply chain transparency work we've done and sustainability. They're brother and sister. They're peanut butter and jelly, or peanut butter and chocolate, if that's your preference. Yeah, I mean, there are not necessarily any new standards we've come across today that need to be implemented to support a cleaner supply chain. I would encourage anyone listening to this, particularly if you are a buyer of advertising, whether you're an agency or a brand. In the Canadian market, things like the supply chain object, that is a way to explicitly track hops of how many hops your impression went to before it arrived to you to bid on. That's a standard that's been in market for 2 years, the supply chain transparency object. So I would encourage adoption of that for sustainability purposes, but then it also has anti-fraud benefits. Another is what we call the global placement ID, or the GPID. That allows you to also track at a placement level, how many times have you seen the same impression opportunity through the supply chain to then understand what is probably the best path for that impression. Like, what is the best supply chain path for that impression? That's also been out as an RTB community extension for well over a year. And there's been some adoption of that in the market, but not as much as we would like. But that was also originally developed for anti-fraud purposes, but then also has very strong sustainability ramifications if that gets more widely adopted. And I think some of the challenges we run into here are education and evangelization on behalf of the Tech Lab. We need to do a better job of making people aware of these standards and driving adoption of it. But I think the other concern is, frankly, I think some supply chain partners are concerned that they're going to get optimized out of the actual supply chain. And I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think there are, if you are a supply chain partner that actually brings value and benefit to both sides of the transaction, or even one side of the transaction, there is a reason media companies work with multiple supply chain partners, right? And if you can demonstrate the benefit of both yield for the publisher, performance for the advertiser, balanced against a carbon reduction goal, then there's no reason you shouldn't remain in the supply chain. However, we have seen in the data that, an impression gets touched by north of 15 partners. That just seems a bit high. Is it 15 partners, or is something more like 4 to 6 partners where you find that balance of performance, yield for the media company against a carbon reduction goal? That's the calculus that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I hadn't appreciated the complexity that goes into the calculator, right? So the measurement, as you said, and how market by market, there may be sort of a different currency that goes into assessing a baseline and all that sort of stuff. None of which we'll be able to solve on this call. But I wonder, do you see a future, I guess, from a Tech Lab perspective, and when you think about your roadmap, similar to when clean rooms started emerging, that there may be some sort of API protocol work that needs to get done on the calculations, or on the calculator effect, and how to integrate it within the SSPs and the DSPs? Do you see maybe some work required there?
That's a really good question. Potentially, We haven't thought that far ahead yet. Potentially, like how do you actually get the carbon score into the impression opportunity on a real-time basis? I don't know if it needs to happen in real time. It may need to, or is it something that's done post campaign, post impression, and then the supply path is optimized accordingly when you look at the carbon footprint of a particular campaign, or if you look at the carbon footprint of a particular environment, right? Whether it's digital video, connected television, mobile, browser-based environment. So it's a good question. We haven't gotten there yet. We're just working to establish these baseline metrics. And candidly, frankly, in full attribution here, we're drafting off of some of the work that IAB France has already done here. IAB France is, I'd say, a bit ahead of the market in terms of creating an initial framework of metrics. Fantastic. That they've asked the Tech Lab to jump in and start to edify.
Fantastic. Well, that's the power of the global network, right? So that's really helpful. Okay, let's talk a little bit about measurement, because I know that there's been a lot of activity on the measurement front within the Tech Lab, particularly where it comes to video. I'd love to hear a little bit of an update on what you're working on there and what's exciting over the next few weeks or months, I guess, in terms of your roadmap?
Sure. So we released the Open Measurement SDK for connected televisions last October of 2022. We are starting to see some uptick in adoption of that specification. And it really solves for two immediate use cases, big use cases. One is zombie televisions, where people leave the room, or you leave your TV on for your dog and your cat, and you go to work for the day. My dog loves ESPN. She particularly loves women's college basketball. So solving for the zombie television, like if there's no one in the room and the TV's just on, the Open Measurement SDK for CTV detects that. So that's a viewability issue in CTV. The other is the TV off, but the device that is the OTT device plugged into the television is potentially still rendering content and therefore ads, but the television's off. The OM SDK for CTV detects those two things. So those are the two immediate use cases it solves for. We launched it last October. We're starting to see an uptick in adoption. We are releasing, so in the coming months, before the end of the year, we will have also released updates to this for both LG and Samsung television sets. So LG and Samsung OEMs will be fully supported as part of this going into Q4. Any buyer listening to this, what I would ask you to do is start to demand the OM SDK for CTV be used for all of your connected television buys, because it creates a normalized viewability set that goes along with the rest of our Open Measurement SDK for mobile and desktop web as well. And the Open Measurement SDK has been adopted. It currently is deployed across about 3 billion plus devices across the globe. We've got about 160 companies globally that have integrated it into their mobile and web footprint. More than half those companies, by the way, are based outside of the US. They're international. So you get the same normalized data set as you would with any other video through other environments. It takes the CTV data sets, and now you can look at holistically what is the viewability of my ad across multiple environments. Mobile and connected TV.
Mm-hmm. Should be so interesting to see what the actual dashboards are now telling, right? I mean, it's been something, it's been a bit of a mystery. So I'm sure that there's some really interesting insights that are coming out of that.
Yeah, we don't actually see the data. It's early days of adoption. But we do want to reach out to companies that have adopted it, and we are curious if they're willing to just share at least anecdotal insights in terms of what they're seeing.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest challenge right now on the measurement front when it comes to video? I know that we've got a lot of initiatives in Canada. One that's being led by the ACA, which is the ANA only in Canada. And it, it's broad stakeholder groups. Everyone is at the table, and it really feels like it is a never-ending story of challenge. So are you making any headway when it comes to cross-platform video, like traditional incorporated into CTV, incorporated into streaming? Where are you with that? Are you anywhere with it?
We are starting to make headway through the newly launched Advanced TV Commit Group. Mm-hmm. So we announced our Advanced TV initiative last November in New York at our Advanced TV event. This concept of an Advanced TV initiative, and we created the Advanced TV Commit Group to finalize the charter and establish the roadmap for cross-environment television advertising reconciliation and measurement. And what that means is to be able to create a framework that transcends cable, satellite, over-the-air broadcast, and connected television for a singular reconciliation and measurement framework. That is the charter of the Advanced TV Initiative and the Commit Group. And we've started to make headway with the Commit Group in finalizing what that roadmap is. We aspire to have some initial standard out by the end of the year. I think that's a stretch goal, candidly. I think it's really looking more like end of Q1 is when we'll have something initially published to the market. But then we're talking about real software development here at Tech Lab in the form of either some form of centralized registry to normalize measurements in the form of maybe some sort of meta creative ID, that allows companies to reconcile globally their television advertising, regardless of environments. So Tech Lab for the first time is, taking a step into traditional linear television. But I think that's necessary if we're, in order to cross a river, you've got to build the bridge. Well, the far side of the far shore is CTV. The future of television is going to be streamed. So television will be delivered over the IP protocol versus legacy standards like QAM-based cable and over-the-air broadcast. So we have to build that bridge, and that bridge is this universal reconciliation and measurement framework that we're developing, and we have to do it in partnership with linear television environments. And that's a bridge that we can take with us as television continues to move to an IP-based delivery mechanism. That bridge comes with. This isn't something that doesn't have light beyond the world of linear. It lives on in an IP-based TV environment. But we're committed to. We think this is a 5-year initiative. We know it's a big initiative. I mean, linear television in the U.S. at least is going to be about $67 billion in 2023. That doesn't go away overnight. We think this is on a 10-year shift to having television primarily deliver the IP protocol. So therefore, we need to embrace working with linear folks to create this bridge in order to manage this shift from linear to IP-based TV. So that's what we're focused on. We hope again to publish something Q1 of next year.
That's really exciting. I wonder, just to check in with you, like gut check. This could be a global framework, right? I mean, a lot of the times you hear, things are really different in our market. Our market is very, very, unique in that we have, X regulations or, X kind of formatting. Do you think that this kind of a framework will be readily available and usable across global markets?
That's our intent. Our intent is to develop a framework that is global.
Perfect.
That can be used by anyone. We do have international constituents involved in the Commit Group. So our goal is, Tech Lab's goal is always to develop something that is usable globally. We are a global trade organization. I know we're based in New York. I know we're based in the US, but the internet is inherently global, and technical standards are inherently global. We would not be having this conversation right now without global technical standards in the form of TCP, IP, HTTP, DNS.
Right.
And the same is true for digital advertising. So Tech Lab's remit has always been global. It always will be global. We are not sure. We partner with IAB Europe on developing the TCF. Absolutely. Because also our job is to, rise to the call of other markets as they're needed. But our remit always has been and always will be global.
Well, I mean, it's a great segue to our last little conversation, which is about a very big problem, and that is the patchwork of privacy and how you're faring there. I know you guys have moved mountains for this cause, and how's it going? How's the global privacy platform evolving, and what are you seeing?
GBP, which we released earlier this year, is gaining traction. It's starting. Adoption is definitely picking up. If it's either been deployed, it's in the middle of deployment, and then other organizations we've talked to, it's on their roadmap for likely a Q1 deployment. We're going into Q4, of course, the industry's biggest quarter globally. So. It's all about the revenue in Q4. So adoption is speeding up around the globe, not just in the US. So I think that's actually progressing well. When it comes to privacy overall, I could take Tech Lab is 22 people. That's all we are. Global trade org, that's 22 people strong. So we're small but mighty. But I could take every resource in Tech Lab and focus it 100% on privacy, and it still wouldn't be enough. Of course, we're not doing that. We've got Rowena Lamb leads our privacy and addressability working groups, and she's been just absolutely phenomenal. I don't know where we would be without her. But there are not enough hours in the day to work on whether it be privacy compliance frameworks, like what's happening in the US. And, we now have 5 state laws in the books, and therefore 5 state strings to support that. Current course and speed based on various state legislatures, it's looking like we may have anywhere between 8 to 12 more next year just in the United States. We were anticipating 5 to 6 more. We're looking between 8 to 12 more. So we may have at its peak case 17 unique privacy laws in the United States next year. But look, the GPP was architected to support this kind of fragmentation. We saw this coming, and you yourself. I mean, you've got Quebec is that their law is going to be enforceable next month, correct? Isn't it September?
Yeah, September.
Yeah. So I mean, there's some slight fragmentation in the Canadian market, right? You've got rest of Canada and then the Quebec law, which is somewhat unique. So you're seeing it as well. You just don't have as many provinces as we do, if you will. Thankfully. And look, Europe's going to continue to evolve. Indian Parliament just passed there's privacy legislation. It wasn't an explicit privacy bill. It was passed. It was passed as part of an economic bill in Indian Parliament, but there is a privacy law that is going to come onto the books in the Indian market. I believe it's 25. I think it's 2025.
Massive
so that's
implications.
Happening. Like that.
Yeah, and it's massive implications. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the fragmentation isn't just in the US, the fragmentation is global.
Right.
And that's what the GPP was designed to do. Like we saw this coming, and we knew we needed some sort of framework that could create a centralized API that could then write strings that are specific to different jurisdictions. The GPP is fully backward compatible with the TCF. You can write your TCF Europe strings with the GPP. You can write your TCF Canada strings with the GPP. You can write all your myriad US state strings with it. It's intended as a centralized API because many companies, Canadian, American, European, are global. The internet's inherently global, so they operate across all these jurisdictions. So that we're going to continue. That's going to be work that we continue to. There's no shortage of work to do. Let's put it that way. Yeah. We are releasing our data subjects right framework in late September, early October, and that is the ability for consumers to access, modify, and delete their information through the digital media supply chain. So that framework, which has been a bear, and it's inherently complex, right? Sure. If I, as a consumer, go to a publisher and say, I want to access my data across the supply chain, and then I want to delete it across the supply chain, you have to propagate a signal across dozens of different partners to ensure that Tony Katsur's data was deleted across the supply chain. That's what the data subject rights framework aspires to do. And that's required by state of California. So, I mean, this is again about coming into regulatory compliance with the industry. Yeah. And then the accountability platform is something we continue to actively work on. We have a framework in place in the accountability platform, and the accountability platform is designed to act as a centralized or perhaps decentralized, depending on the final design, normalized audit mechanism focused on ensuring consumer consent was properly captured and then tracked through the supply chain, right? So where do we see things like consent strings disappear? If the consent string is signed, did the signature change through the supply chain? So it's really meant to act as a check engine light for self-audit, government audit, privacy advocacy audits, to create a normalized set of privacy compliance signaling for the industry. Because I do believe, as do regulators, that all of these consent frameworks or privacy compliance frameworks without some form of audit mechanism, I think they are, they could be perceived as paper tigers. Like there needs to be real auditability behind these solutions. I think for regulators to embrace them and say, yes, this works for us, for you to come into compliance. So those are the three major things that Tech Lab works on. Again, continued support of IAB Europe and the work that they do on the TCF, as well as continued support of the work you do for TCF Canada.
Yeah. We spend a little bit of time on the accountability working group calls, as well as the global privacy calls. And one thing that is becoming abundantly clear is the cost of all this, right? And the tremendous cost for publishers and for advertisers to continue to invest in the digital advertising sector. And my biggest concern is also on the SMEs, on the small to medium sized businesses that are now having to comply across all of these different standards. And I hope that we will create some sort of an innovation that creates a scalable approach, an accessible approach for the entire ecosystem, and not just for the few that can afford to, to continue to pay on, what I'm going to call a legislative tax, right? An international legislative tax, and cut the small ma and pa shops out of the opportunities that the digital ecosystem affords. So I really appreciate all the work that IAB Tech Lab does to help make that a reality, right? So, building standards, building frameworks, approaching the internet as a global entity and not as a market by market, a reinvention of the wheel. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and for everything that you do. And we could spend probably another few hours just talking. And I feel like, maybe we should talk again in a month or so and just talk, I don't know, about AI. We haven't even talked about AI.
Yes. Right? We did. Something, and thank you for that, Sonia. I appreciate the consideration and the recognition of the work we do, but something that would be exclusive to IAB Canada and whoever's listening. At the last board meeting several weeks ago, we did form the very first Tech Lab board level subcommittee, and it's going to be focused on AI. And just for listeners, the Tech Lab board is comprised of some of the best and brightest technical minds in our ecosystem. And those minds are going to come together focused on AI, because it's AI, there are developments in our ecosystem and other industries where you've got to look at hype versus reality. And I think what's happening in AI skews more towards reality. It's here, it's real. And frankly, media companies are rightfully concerned. So the immediate charter of this AI subcommittee is to look at solutions to protect publishers. That's what we're going to focus on as the first deliverable that we want to come out with. And our goal is to have something late this year around AI, something actionable. That's our goal. But yeah, this is at a Tech Lab board level.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's exclusive. We haven't announced that to the industry, so you've got the exclusive on that one.
Well, I feel very privileged. So let's book it. Let's book the next call, and we'll make it all about AI. And in the meantime, wishing you all the best on the projects that you have on the go. We look forward to further participation in all your amazing working groups, and would like to call out to our own membership. If you're not involved with IAB Tech Lab, please get involved with IAB Tech Lab. Reach out to us, and we'll help you figure out how to become a member. And with that, have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Sonia.